Am I the butthole for taking back my tip when our waitress returned the bill saying, "Was something wrong with the food? Where's the rest of the tip?" Update: clarifying that this happened in Canada, not the US, for those implying that it did. I dined in at a local Chinese restaurant with a friend. Great food, but almost no interactions were made with any of the waitresses other than being given the food, as you had to reserve your table position online in advance, as well as place your order online once finally seated, due to COVID safety measures. The bill came out to be just about $30, and I tipped just a little above 15%, giving $5. Our waitress took the bill from our table, paid for in cash, and as we were readying to get up and leave, she returned with the $5 bill we left to cover the tip and in a passive-aggressive tone saying, "Was something wrong with the food? Where's the rest of the tip?" I didn't appreciate that we were even approached at all, and I was shocked and confused that an interaction as such even happened, as I recall it being the very first time I was confronted for not tipping enough, as my usual 15% tip suffices in past restaurant experiences. In an act of frustration, I took back the $5 I left as a tip from the bill and walked out of the restaurant with my friend without saying a word, despite the waitress trying to get our attention as we walked away. In the moment, we both agreed that it was an insane thing for the waitress to do, acting as if we didn't tip at all. The waitress that had confronted us had been someone we had close to almost no contact with the entire time, as she had only been to our table once to give our food, as I had stated above. But reflecting on it, we were wondering what should have been done in that situation. Ignore her request to tip more and leave the $5 bill as it was, or give a larger tip as she asked just to get the situation over with? I'd love to hear more opinions, and if a situation like this has ever happened to you. Am I the butthole for taking back my tip? Edit: a few people have pointed out the fact that because I pointed out that I had almost no interactions with the waitress, I come off as entitled, making it seem like the minimal contact with the waitress was a factor in taking back my tip. Some have also implied that I come off as entitled because I wanted a waiter/waitress to come by every so often to ask how the food was. In hindsight, I shouldn't have included that part, but did so thinking that I could point out the excellent safety measures set in place by the restaurant, considering the pandemic. In no way did I want to speak face-to-face with a waiter/waitress during the time spent eating our meal, especially because we had our masks off. NTA. This is why I can't stand America's hospitality industry. You're forced to have to live off tips if you're staff because it's legal for your workplace to underpay you, and feel obliged to have to tip if you're a customer because otherwise you feel guilty. The fact is, it's not your fault she has to rely on tips, and it's also not your fault that the quality of her service meant you were interacted with at all throughout your visit. Some people will tell you that you were wrong for under-tipping and that 20% is what you should have done, and yes, I agree that it's nice to tip well for good service, but you tipped what you wanted to and she chose to argue it despite still getting tipped. Edit: I'm aware that original post has now said that this was in Canada and not the US, however I stand by my point and still believe that the waitress in question was acting entitled and ungrateful. Edit 2: Guys, don't jump on original post for mentioning the waitress didn't come by to check on his table. Obviously we're in a pandemic and so the rules make common practice in some instances difficult, but it's really not hard to ask a question from a distance. It's not like under normal circumstances waitresses whisper in your ear while you're eating. Wasn't it customary to tip 10% just a few years ago, or did I dream that? Edit: I didn't dream it, but it seems it was in a previous life. In 1922, Emily Post wrote, "You will not get good service unless you tip generously, and the rule is 10%. Edit 2: I googled around a bit and found lots of articles who claim standard tipping in the 1950s was 10%, but the few that actually cited a source were behind paywalls. I must have gotten it from old movies and/or TV shows. But tipping inflation is real. I found lots of studies that show that not only are people expected to tip more, but more and more services expect to be tipped. To me, it seems any time you come into contact with a person in a profession that does not require a higher education, you're supposed to tip them, but I might be wrong. Maybe it was, but my point is that tipping culture in the UK compared to the US is really relaxed. It feels far more optional and far more satisfying when you make that choice. Unfortunately, I'm a student without a lot of money, so I can't always afford to tip, or tip well, on the rare occasion I go out for food. So when I do tip, I feel like it's really deserved, and I can make someone's day a little better off my own back as opposed to it feeling obligatory and awkward. I'm not American either, And from an outsider perspective, it seems like American tipping culture has been spinning out of control in the last few years. In my country, we rarely tip. At most, we round up the bill at restaurants. Americans tip everything, and from internet comments, it seems like the amount you're expected to tip is creeping upward. Yeah, it sucks. And even for like delivery and stuff, they will guilt you with intense messages about how no extra fees or anything go to the driver and recommend tips. Some places automatically factor it into your total. A lot of restaurants will have it printed on the receipt with the math already done for you for recommended tips. I was a waitress for a long time and left cause I got tired of making $2.63 an hour. $2.63 an hour? My God, that's awful. I'm really sorry wait staff get paid like that. I'm going to get downvoted to hell for this take, but after 10 years in various restaurants, from $9/plate quick casual to $50+/plate fine dining, it's pretty damn true. Any server who genuinely complains about the hourly pay is either bad at it or at an absolute crap restaurant. Obviously, there are good days and bad days, and certain shifts and even sections of the restaurant produce more than others. Friday/Saturday dinner service is much bigger than Tuesday lunch, and you're going to make more money inside next to the fireplace when it's cold and rainy than you would on the patio, for example, but overall, it all balances out. Every quality server I've ever known averages well north of $15/hour, if not north of $20, which is often quite a bit more than they could earn elsewhere with a high school education. When I was in fine dining, it was a bad day if I didn't make at least $2 to $2.50 in my 6-hour shift, which always included a family meal from the chef, after service for lunch, before for dinner. Truly, I took a pay cut when I left the industry for a more traditional 9 to 5. Honestly, the biggest problem with working in restaurants as a tipped employee is the impact it has on creditworthiness. You see, cash tips are self-reported for tax purposes, and I've never met a surveyor/bartender who declares their cash tips. Thus, a server taking home $34K/mo shows $2,000 per month gross on their tax return/pay stub, which can make it difficult to, say, buy enough car to haul 3 kids or totes a kayak at a good rate. I sold cars for a few years, a couple jobs after I left restaurants, and probably a good quarter of what I did was work with those in the service industry via word of mouth. Most of my industry clients were shocked at how much they actually made when I had them declare everything for a couple pay periods to prove income. It's wild how much more expensive money is when you're poor on paper, and how frivolously people spend when they've always got a couple $100 in their pocket. The point is that servers aren't the sweatshop workers they pretend to be on the internet, and if it feels that way, personal finance choices play a large role in it, and I'm a shining example of poor choices. I stayed comfortable enough, though still rationing food/gas at the end of the month to make rent, but could have been so much better off if I wasn't spending $20 to $60 at the bar 6 nights a week. Thank you for saying this. When I was younger and worked various jobs at just above minimum wage, my friends who worked for tips always made much more than I did. People like to say how hard servers work. They may very well work hard. So do people who work other jobs for crap pay without tips. So true. For example, nobody tips the garbage man or the septic tank maintenance guy, and yet I can't think of worse jobs where you work harder. We are tipping the wrong people. Not trying to disagree with you about tipping these people, but it's worth pointing out that people working these jobs, municipal etc., are way more likely to be receiving benefits like health insurance than people in the service industry, and too. Many servers make far below minimum wage before tips. I make $2.73 an hour, all of which automatically goes to taxes, and the rest of my income is tips. I'm definitely not trying to say that servers are harder working/more deserving than other wage workers, but I do want to make clear that tips are essentially our entire income. Other wage workers may be just as deserving of tips than servers, but for many of us, it's pretty much the only money we get. In Puerto Rico around Christmas time they come around later in the day to pick up trash so people are home to tip them. They are also extra loud to make sure people know they're coming through. Agreed. I don't know any servers that make less than $25 per hour. In a major city, $50 per hour. At an Italian restaurant or steakhouse, you're looking at $100 per hour. Servers cry that they don't make any money, but they would also cry if we got rid of tipping and paid them a livable wage instead. The tips are expected, regardless of how bad the service is, because they only make $2 per hour. While they do make a lot per hour in tips, you do have to remember that they don't get 40-hour weeks. If they get even one table that tips per hour, then they're making minimum wage or above. If they only had to serve one table per hour, then they need to work at a more popular restaurant or move out of their one-horse town. The people saying that they made only $2 per hour are saying that nobody comes to their restaurant. How is that place still in business? As far as tipping percentage in the US, I think they expect 30% now. I always do 20 to 25% because the math is easier. It was at 15% in the 90s, but it keeps going up every year. 20% is the industry standard these days, at least in the Baton Rouge/New Orleans area where I am. I grew up in restaurants and everything you said is 100% true. Yeah, I'm Canadian so figures differ a bit, but I averaged $30/hour serving just in tips. We were a pretty busy place but still. Tipping nothing is trashy considering everyone knows servers are living on tips, but even a below 10% tip will add to your take home. If everyone is stiffing you, you are definitely the problem. As an American who has worked a tip job, if tips plus the wait staff wage don't meet minimum wage, the employer has to make up the difference. It still sucks. A lot. It's just an unfair culture though, isn't it? In the UK, for example, you generally get good service despite there being no obligation to tip, and that, in my opinion, at least makes tipping far more comfortable, because I believe that when service is genuinely good, I can feel good giving more of my money to whoever served me. Also, I feel like if you don't have a lot of money, you can just tip what you're comfortable with here, whereas in the US, as seen in Op's example, if you don't tip the expected amount, you can run into awkward situations. Yeah, here in the Netherlands, you're not expected to tip either. I don't think many people tip regularly over here. And yet, I think the service is generally fine. Yeah, I am aware a lot of tourists disagree, because the wait staff is only harassing you every 5 minutes, instead of every 30 seconds, so sometimes you have to flag down wait staff. I live in Germany and waiters here can be pretty straight shooting. I like that. They get in, bring the food, leave, and take your money when you call them. They're here to serve me food, not butter me up for extra money. I like that a lot. Some might find that unfriendly. I think it's relaxing. I've waitressed in the US and know plenty of other wait staff. Very few people end up liking to work at the restaurants that pay a fair wage instead of relying on tips. Tips can make you so much money. Obviously not everywhere, but in a decent-sized city at a decent restaurant. Waiting tables for tips is a great way to make a living for many. The issue is that in small towns and rural areas, most wait staff never make enough to cover bills. I've been wait staff in a town with 1,100 people and I can tell you for sure I never made decent tips, versus waiting tables in a town with 30k people. In the bigger town my tips were better, but I still never made the dollar that I know a lot of wait staff can. Oh yeah, I totally see the issue is smaller areas. I only have experience in bigger cities and know that people prefer not to work at the fair wage restaurants. I'm not sure how to reconcile some people getting paid dirt because of our tipping practices and other people getting paid extremely well because of it. You're always going to have people in the industry on both sides. Yeah, the tipping culture in the US is weird, but don't be mistaken. Servers in the hospitality industry are not upset about this arrangement and in no way, shape, or form the losers of this tip culture. I was a server for years at a wide variety of restaurants, and trust me, it was a relatively easy job with short hours for how much money I made. In cash. I would work maybe 6 hours on a busy night and walk out with $200 in cash, over 10 years ago, so closer to $250 today. This was in a very low cost of living area. Think my rent was a bit over $200 at the time, so I lived pretty well off that money. The back of house and front of house staff that lived off a flat hourly wage had it much, much worse. 1. Not the butthole because she absolutely deserved to have her tip taken away. Super tacky. 2. Tipping amount is now typically 20%, for reasonable/good service FYI. In this case, where there wasn't much service, 15% would have been fine before the way she acted. Would tips reach 30% by 2030? Probably. One hopes a better system will emerge between now and then. Unlikely, as wait staff in the US don't want to reform the system as they are likely to earn more from tips than they would on a living wage. I read an article about cities that raised the minimum wage that included wait staff. It focused on someone from DC. People stopped tipping as much or at all because either the restaurants raised their prices to cover increased salaries or customers knew the waitstaff was making above minimum wage. They actually made less money because of it. The idea that waitstaff make too much money through tips is used to tip people less. If this is in fact true, people make way above living wage off tips, then people will go back to tipping less. The reality is, majority of waitstaff barely make minimum wage with their tips, and the added insecurity that comes from not knowing whether customers will tip well or having to endure harassment by them is not worth it. A 20% tip with his total before taxes would have sat him at $6. She literally wrote a passive-aggressive note over $1. She didn't write a note, she was actively aggressive about it, haha. NTA. Fully agree with this here. 15% is for passable service, 20% or more is for good/great service. Hell, if you're nice and I see you more than twice the entire visit, you'll probably get bumped into the good service category. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube and share them with your friends. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. We welcome your comments below. Another of our videos will begin shortly.